Hi.
It's Sarah from Spikeable Trades, and this is my next creativity interview, and I'm talking to Ricardo.
Yay.
Hi, Ricardo.
Hi, Sarah.
Ricardo he's a person of the world, as you'll find out in this brief but interesting interview. So, Ricardo, tell me a little bit about your project.
It's a sex project.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Sex Goddess Project.
Okay. How long have you been doing it?
6 years.
And what do you do?
Photograph people having sex.
And why?
Well, that's a complicated question. I'll answer it two ways.
Okay.
First of all, it's an anti-porn project.
Okay.
I think that images are like food. And if you can imagine what kind of world we'd have if the only food people had available to them was junk food.
Yeah.
So I consider porn junk food,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to be whole foods.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm trying to provide something a little more nutritious and healthier than what people normally get offered in the public space.
And how has that affected your life doing this project?
It's ruined my life.
No, really.
Yes, it has.
Hey, how's it ruined your life?
Well, I mean, it's not like it wasn't challenging enough to be a black man in Canada. It's not like it wasn't challenging enough to be a black male artist in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Not like it wasn't challenging enough to be a starving black male artist in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take on a sex project.
Mm-hmm.
The level of obstacles and animosity and misunderstanding that gets thrown at you just multiplies exponentially.
Right.
I've been a photographer for 34 years,
Mm-hmm.
so before this I was photographing nudes, just simple non-sexual nudes in color
Mm-hmm.
in natural landscapes, and I'd done that for 23 years, and that's what I was known for.
Oh, wow.
And then
you wanted to kick it up a notch.
I didn't want to. I had resisted for all those years doing anything sexual.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want my work compared to porn.
Mm-hmm.
I also knew that, there'd be a lot of trouble and a lot of censorship,
Right.
problems with Facebook and Instagram and whatever if I did anything sexual, and I didn't want to, have to deal with that. But my models themselves kind of pushed me to make the work more sexual.
Why?
Because the simple answer was they felt that I was holding them back. They felt that I was repressing them. And I didn't know that until one day I was photographing a 70-year-old model, an artist, in nature, as I normally did.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of her shoot, she started masturbating.
Wow.
And we hadn't discussed it, and she gave no warning, so it just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what else to do, so I just kept shooting.
Sure, why not? I mean, yeah.
What else are you going to do?
You're there with a camera.
Yep.
She's masturbating.
And it's a shoot.
Yeah.
Show must go on.
Yeah, yeah.
And we didn't talk about it afterwards. And I just thought, okay, that was just a random thing. And then shortly after, the same thing happened with a 53-year-old. And I had to think about it because it was just strange because, first of all, none of the 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds had ever done it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, a 70-year-old and a 53-year-old do it. But then I was thinking, why are they doing it at all? And so I talked to them, and I talked to other people that I'd photographed. And, they pretty much all said that, it felt very empowering to be outdoors and naked with the sun on your skin. And if you feel comfortable, naturally, sometimes some sexual feelings come up.
Right.
And they knew that I wanted none of that in the photographs, so they felt like they didn't get a chance to fully express what they were feeling in the moment.
Wow.
So I promised them that in the next book they could express themselves more freely. So as an experiment for the next book, I did a book of women masturbating.
Wow.
And that was a good experience. It was much more challenging for me as a photographer. It made me have to change the kind of cameras that I used and the lighting that I used and the way that I work with models. And it was, it was empowering for them. And
is this book available right now? Like, can people buy it if anybody is watching this and wants to check it out?
well, the easiest way is to go to sexgoddessproject.com.
Okay.
And there's a contact page there.
Okay.
Or they can Google my name,
Oh, yeah. And what's your full name?
Ricardo Scipio.
Got that?
Scipio. Ricardo.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. So I talk a lot about creativity and how we're trained to be conformists and trained to like standardization, and how our school system, generally speaking, dumbs down our creative instincts. So have you always been creative, and how was that as a young person or a younger person?
I've always been creative, and I dig what you're saying, and I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay.
After I finished high school, stupid me, instead of going to medical school or going to law school, I went to art school.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the best art school in Canada.
Oh.
And in my photography classes, my photography professor said to us that the only valid forms of photography were street photography and landscape photography, and that everything else was crap. You know, conform to the art school,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
rules
Sure.
and traditions. And so for a class project, I brought in a nude of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have seen it. He freaked out. He screamed at me. I screamed at him. We screamed and shouted at each other for 45 minutes in front of the
Really?
whole class
Wow.
until both of us were crying.
Wow. That's amazing.
So that's so even in art school, you're not encouraged to be a free thinker.
Yeah.
You're not encouraged to follow your own muse.
Mhm.
It's about, you know, sort of rigid ideas of what's acceptable and not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
He told us that it was not possible for a man to photograph a woman without it being exploitative,
Because of the male gaze.
which, you know,
Well, I mean, it's a real thing.
it's not a real thing. It's BS. First,
Okay, good. This is good. Okay, so why is the male gaze BS?
because for one thing, you can't compare black men to white men, or you can't compare other men to white men. We don't have the same
Privilege.
culture and privilege and history.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, tell me. I mean, you know, is the black male gaze similar to the white male gaze? I don't think so.
Okay, so what is it then?
What is what?
If it's not the white male gaze, what is it?
I don't think there's a male gaze. I think
So you don't even think there's a white male gaze?
no. I don't think so. I mean, I think that you know, certain white men have had the power and the influence to
Right.
shape how movies and
Porn.
paintings and
I mean, you're
porn-
doing anti-porn, and I mean, let's face it, porn has been created mostly by white males.
Sure, but I'm also doing sexual photography. You know, white male photographers are obsessed with shooting skinny 20-year-old white women.
Sure.
So for me, my work's always been about diversity. So you're not going to see skinny 20-year-old white women in my project. So is it fair to compare my gaze to, you know, those 90% of white male photographers that are obsessed with skinny white women with their ribs showing? I don't think so.
Well, is it about being fair? I mean, let's just say it. Comparison is comparison. Like, this is where our mind goes. I don't mean to compare anything to anything else.
Mhm.
But that's what happens. You know, we exist in a world together. So while I respect your opinion and I know that it's backed up by years of experience, I also feel like I have a different experience of being somebody who's been affected by the male gaze. I mean, not necessarily in a beneficial way, but I definitely have felt it, reacted to it, and been a little bit creeped out by it. I wouldn't say that by every man. No, absolutely not.
But what do you mean when you say the male gaze?
Well, because the
Because it's
male
kind of a-
gaze
it's
is,
kind of a
is
catch-all
about a certain
phrase.
kind of framing of the female form. The only time that I haven't appreciated it is when I have felt vulnerable or afraid. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is real. It's kind of scary. It's exploitive. It's, you know, not having control over how your body is seen is difficult. This culture wants me to see my body as something that needs to be fixed, not something that should be just appreciated, not something that should be enjoyed, but something that is in some way broken or, you know, not what it should be, so that I can buy a whole bunch of shit that'll solve a bunch of problems that I don't actually even fucking have.
I hear,
And that's what I'm talking about when I say the male gaze, because those ads are created by people who want to control my behavior. And I'm just going to say 90% of them are white males.
Yes, I agree with you. My question to you is, how is that any different than how you and, as a white woman and white men have looked at and exploited black bodies?
Nothing. No, there's no difference.
So what?
Except,
No, you're interrupting me.
wait, but except you asked a question and I have one exception.
Okay.
I said there's no difference except I have no power.
You have a lot of power.
Personally,
No.
over how you see your body.
I could say I have no power personally over how you see your body.
You don't.
So then what's the point of using a phrase like the male gaze?
Because I just said it was the white male gaze and I just explained my history with it.
Right, but I'm just saying, why use that term at all? Because if we
Because everybody knows. It's like a general phrase that people recognize.
no, it's not a phrase that's used in the black community. It's not used in other communities. It's a very elitist, sort of white, educated phrase.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think I have a ton of black viewers out there. And it's not that I don't want to talk to them. It's not that I don't respect them. It's not that I don't appreciate their presence. But I can't falsely change my narrative to make someone feel more comfortable, though I'd like to, because then I'm not comfortable, and I don't want to be fake to anyone. I don't want to be offensive. I am, though. I am very offensive. I've lived with it all my life.
I think every time you say the male gaze, you should also say the white gaze.
Okay. You're right. I agree with that. I think I'm going forward. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem.
I guess I just would be curious about how you view conformity and creativity.
Well, I think that the main gift that artists give to the world is authenticity. And I think that's a very difficult thing to maintain. It's difficult when you're young. When you're a kid, your natural instinct is to want to fit in and be accepted by the gang around you.
Yeah.
And it's tough to be an outsider. As soon as you're labeled as different, you get all kinds of punishments.
Yeah.
So you learn from an early age that the society rewards people that conform and it punishes people that don't.
Yes.
And if you can survive that and maintain, some integrity and maintain some love of yourself and believe in yourself, then you're doing really well. It's not easy to do, and it's very important in art, because we're the ones that discuss the uncomfortable questions.
Sure.
We challenge the way people look at themselves and look at the world. Sometimes when they're not ready to. Sometimes we're a bit ahead of our time.
Right.
And we're creating things that people don't want to see.
Yeah.
And often you get punished for that as well.
Right.
So all through that, you have to maintain your authenticity and your self-belief. Even if you're in a situation where no one else likes your work or no one else believes in your work, you have to believe in it.
Right.
Because there's only one you. So if you don't do the work, it's your job to authentically express the things that only you can express. And if you don't express them, then they'll never get expressed, and the world will, be a poorer place, without it.
Right.
So I think it's very important to not conform any more than you need to when you're an artist.
Or really, if you're anyone, right?
If you're anyone, but again, if you're an insurance salesman, you can conform a bit more. You can wear those khakis. You can rock those khakis. No, it'd be nice if all of us had a little more rebel in us, despite the deprivations that come with it. I think it's just such a blessing to be an artist.
Agreed. Thank you.
We agree on something. Yes.
Whatever. We agree on stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Power to the peaceful.